Hi everyone, it's Becky here. So today is a bright sunny day in June 2025 and I'm visiting this heritage coffee house. So last year, around the end of November 2024, I sketched the inside of this heritage coffee house with festive colors and the cozy atmosphere. So the age of this heritage house is 152 years old. So last winter, I wanted to sit there and sketch this beautiful tree, but it was too cold back then in late November. So here I'm back in early June 2025, sitting down at the same table. Now let's flip through my current sketchbook. So all of these sketches were done on location from real life observations. There's a beautiful chapel in Richmond, the Mineral Chapel. I also love sketching still life, fruits, and my snacks, and play with composition. So I'm gonna finish that page spread later with some smaller sketches, but today I want to do a big, compelling sketch. Here's my gooseneck tripod attached to the edge of the table. I'm gonna put my phone there on the end, and here is the beautiful Catalpa tree, looking so elegant. So I got a cup of London Fog latte and a muffin. So let's get started on sketching. So I'm not gonna sketch my food and drink today. I'm gonna just sketch the tree and the garden area. So here's my quick pencil draft, where you can see I just lay out the rough size and placement of this large catalpa tree, the lane going outside, and other fluffy foliage around. Okay, now let's get started on this exciting drawing project. So I'm going to start with, drawing the contour outline of the trunk, the left, and the first bough, and the second bough, the two boughs joining together into this large trunk. Now, from this first bough, I'm dividing it into like a few smaller branches. Yeah, so I actually love sketching trees because they are kind of like abstract human mannequins with elegant dance gestures, including the shapes of these branches looking like arms, and then adding some smaller branches and twigs, stretching out from the larger branches, starting to doodle a few leaves. And there's something nice about working in a sketchbook is the action of drawing across the spine area, connecting the two pages together. Yeah, now I'm starting to spread my lines towards the left side of the page spread, building up on these smaller branches. Yeah, some intersections, and then doodle a few leaves along the way. And yeah, it takes a lot of patience to observe all of these overlapping relationships and putting everything together. So when I'm drawing a tree, I like to focus on those major branches. You don't have to capture every single twig that's on that tree. So just capture as many are able to, but you don't want to miss those major branches and the boughs. So when drawing these twigs and leaves, I'm using a summarizing approach. Yeah, so just observing how these leaves are laid out, dangling downwards in this situation here, and just capture the rhythm that you see. So I always like to add a sense of narrative to my urban and landscape sketches. Now, spending just about 30 seconds to draw this man, standing on the lane waiting for his friend. So adding people and animals to a landscape sketch always helps to show proportions even better. Now this catalpa tree is looking so much bigger compared to a human. So the idea of relativity is a pretty important factor in a landscape sketch. Now I'm spending some more time and patience to doodle these leaves. Pay attention to the overall angles of how these leaves are laid out on the branches and twigs. adding some twigs to connect the leaves better so they're not just drifting in the air. They're tied up together by twigs. So even for like very fluffy tree canopies with leaves all over, we can still see some hidden branches and twigs coming in and out of the tree's canopy. And now I want to take a break sketching more leaves. So now I'm using these loose segments of strokes to suggest the bark texture of the trunk. And some green lichen or algae growing on the bottom part of the tree trunk. And there are always overlapping relationships in pretty much any landscape. Now I'm doodling these leaves from a separate plant. I think it's maybe like a rhododendron shrubbery in front of the tree. Adding some more lichen texture and bark texture. So when the air quality is very clean and there's high moisture in the air, lichen tend to grow, more quickly and all over many surfaces. And moving on to adding the bark texture for some larger branches here. Adding some twigs and leaves. So after drawing the big shapes, right now it is all about filling in the blanks, adding the bark texture, the leaves and branches in between. Just enjoying the moment because I got the whole day for free without any work ahead. I think we all need days like this, from morning to night. All we have to do is very much like nothing, but not wasting the time at the same time by doing something creative, therapeutic. So the drawing process, it took me about 1 hour to get these details in. For like 10 years ago, when I first started, I probably wouldn't dare to attempt something like this. So even I tried this like 10 years ago, it could take me like maybe 3 hours to draw. So now I'm way faster, more confident because I'm doing this pretty much every single day. And of course, you don't have to attempt something so hard like this every single day. As you can see from my previous videos and my Instagram posts, I do keep the practice pretty simple most of the time by doing smaller sketches of the views outside my windows. Now I'm drawing the two wheels of the ox cart. I think this is one of the artifacts from the heritage house over 100 years ago. And drawing these brackets of the cart and the wood grainy texture. Okay, so that's the drawing of the ox cart. Now behind it is the little gate where people can go in and out from the corner of the street outside. And the top part of the gate is covered up with more leaves from this Catalpa tree. Now these leaves are looking smaller on the other side of the canopy, and that's my awareness, of the change of distance. Leaves on the other side of the canopy, they're more far away from us. So so I draw them a little bit smaller. Those branches and twigs on the other side of the dome-shaped canopy, they're also kind of foreshortened, looking smaller at the same time. Okay, and just doodle some leaves on the other side of the dome-shaped canopy. When I'm drawing, I always see everything in front of me as 3D shapes, like spheres, cubes, rectangular prisms, instead of just flat circles and squares. I just drew the lane where the man is standing on, giving a sense of perspective. And then this is the lawn area where a lovely shrubbery is growing with purple leaves. And I think this little purple tree here could be a Japanese maple, maybe. I'm not too sure, but it's very pretty. And it's nice to see, bits of red, pink, and purple among all of those greeneries of foliage for a sense of color variation. And yeah, so when you're drawing organic matters like plantations, you don't have to hesitate for too long. Just keep your lines flowing. Now I'm drawing these bars of this little corridor leading people to the little parking lot. Yeah. These columns and the body of a car showing. And the bushy texture in between the bars, adding a sense of space. So as you can see, as I'm drawing these foliage details in the background, the shapes are very loose, open, with a sense of incompleteness. So they're not way too sharp and coming forward to compete for attention with the leaves of the Catalpa tree. Drawing some electricity posts far away, adding more points of interest, and cars running on the street, bushes far away, and then the rhododendron bush closer up. So the drawing is now completed and it's time to paint watercolors. So I'm going to start to block in the first layer of the green leaves on the Catalpa tree, the lightest tone that I could see. So I'm using Daniel Smith's watercolors, starting off with spring green mixed with a little bit of yellow ochre, adding some overlay of pure spring green for some fun blending and color variation. So most of the time I'm using about half and half mix of yellow ochre and spring green to show the sunshine, going through these leaves. And the punches of pure spring green are suggestions of leafy areas less illuminated. Yeah, but most of the leaves, are catching a lot of sunlight, having an organic yellow-green tone. And yellow ochre is always our friend to paint organics. And no matter what brand of watercolors I use, I pretty much never use the pure greens from those palettes. I always like to mix a little bit of yellow ochre into any of the greens to make the green look more organic. And this yellow-green is also making the leaves looking more translucent, with slight bit of contrast already by wet into wet, some pure spring green here and there. And when we're painting a scenery with a very high percentage of greens, I think the key is to play with like a variation, like many kinds of greens, and also play with value or tonal transition. So here, as you can see, for this rhododendron shrubbery, I started with some quick punches of yellow-green and some pure spring green. Same for this shrubbery here as well. So usually the top 20% of each foliage is illuminated by the sunlight, and the lower 50 to 60% is mid-tone to dark tones. So for these background foliage, I'm actually mixing hooker's green with a little bit of yellow ochre. And observe more deeply to see which part is more illuminated on a foliage and which part is more shaded. So in general, the top 30% is brighter. Same for lawns. So I'm painting this garden scenery around noon, so the sun is right in the middle of the sky shining down. At other times, the illuminated side could be on the left or on the right. Now I'm painting this little purple tree here using imperial purple mixed with quinacridone rose, and then shading the bottom half of the tree's canopy using pretty much pure imperial purple. Yeah, so always remember to shade your foliage to suggest a sense of volume. We're painting three-dimensional things, not flat 2D things. And sitting under the shade of this Catalpa tree on this day is actually a little chilly because it's not a very hot summer day here in Vancouver yet. And I'm continuing to paint the rest of my picture, staining everything with this very diluted yellow ochre, including the lane and the corridor here, and using yellow ochre to paint the branches of the little purple tree. Now I'm mixing burnt sienna with yellow ochre and dilute it with a lot of water to paint the first layer for the catalpa's tree trunk and branches. And just like anything else in the world, the surface of tree branches is not a solid brown. So now I'm painting the lightest tone that I could observe on the surface of a tree trunk and branches. Not too dark yet. Now, second layer, a little bit darker. So I'm mixing burnt sienna with raw umber, this time containing less water compared to that first layer. And I see most of the shaded areas are around the two sides of the trunk and on the higher branches, where it's receiving a lot of shadows from the leaves. I'm also mixing imperial purple into burnt sienna to create like a different shade of brown. Very much the same recipe as I painted those dried grass at West Dyke Trail in my last video. And shading these branches, leaving the top edges untouched. Now they're turning from 2D shapes to 3D shapes of cylinders. So tree trunks and branches, they are cylinders of different sizes and bending shapes. Okay, so now I'm switching to my medium tip water brush now as I'm moving to refining the details and more intense shading. Now I'm shading these leaves with like a darker tone by mixing a little bit of burnt sienna into hooker's green. Following my observation, yeah, so these leaves on the lower part of the canopy, they are more shaded. So nothing in the world during daytime is 100% shaded. So as I'm shading these leaves, I'm leaving some areas of each leaf a little illuminated. And using punches of brush marks to suggest leaves far away instead of drawing all the leaves with fine liner pen. And I just love the translucent quality of watercolor paint. As you're layering, I think you're never 100% covering the previous layer completely. Part of the previous layer is still kind of shining through. And this is the charm of watercolors. Very different from oil painting and acrylic painting. Of course, all art mediums have their own unique charms. But watercolor is my favorite medium to sketch outdoors because it's so handy, creating very satisfactory results. Yeah, and mixing more hooker's green with burnt sienna. So for the far away bushes, it's very gently painted. Now for the foreground bushes, I'm using heavier tones containing less water, using slightly choppy brush marks to be a little bit more specific because these are closer up, deserving more details. And at the same time, being aware of the lighting condition, not to overshade these foliage, all the way to the top. So just stop around the 50% mark with the shading for each foliage. Okay, so now I'm grabbing some raw umber, very diluted, to paint the roof of a distant house. And then using more concentrated raw umber and burnt sienna mix to paint these wooden bars of the corridor, playing with value transition. So one side of these bars are brighter, the other side is shaded. And I'm continuing to use burnt sienna with raw umber mix to shade the branches for this little purple tree, which is looking very lively among the group of greens. So when painting a scenery with very similar colors, it's really nice to have at least one thing that has a very different color to pop out. Now I'm painting the dappled light and shadow on the lawn using the shade of green, which is burnt sienna mixed with hooker's green. So from my intuition, everything on the bottom half of a painting needs to be looking a little heavier. So now I'm intensifying the shading tones by using cobalt blue mixed with hooker's green and burnt sienna for the darkest shade of green among these foliage. And it's pretty hard to see the shapes of leaves on shaded areas of foliage, so they are in general a big chunk of shade of green. Now I'm using more concentrated raw umber to paint the ox cart. And now I see the tree trunk and branches needs higher contrast. So now I'm mixing yellow ochre with burnt sienna and also raw umber. This time painting wet on dry for this third layer. So this intense tone won't fade out because the previous layer is already dried. It will stay nice and strong. At the same time, not over shading, just shading the edges of the tree trunk area. And by the way, I think this Catalpa tree must be really old. So I estimate it could be 50 to 70 years old, maybe more. So I'm not an expert in biology. If you happen to know like a Catalpa tree in your neighborhood, just let me know. I think the Catalpa tree is more rare compared to other species of trees like maples, cherries, apple trees. And yeah, continuing to use pretty sharp and choppy brush marks, bold brush marks, to push the green leaves forward. So for the last stage of all watercolor paintings, don't be afraid to add on these bold punches of shading tones, but not over adding it yet. So this summer, I'm planning to visit more gardens and paint more foliage or buildings, urban structures surrounded by foliage. I love doing cafe sketches, but now I want to just find a different topic that also interests me. Now I'm painting the shadow for the man using leftover cobalt blue and royal purple mix. That's it. And it was a wonderful 2 hours sitting down here at the little round table sketching the view. Now it's time to go home. So thank you so much for watching this video, everyone. If you like it, please click like and leave me a comment below. Subscribe to my channel for weekly updates. And I'll see you around in the next tutorial video very soon. Bye, everyone.